Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how CEOs, founders, and senior executives sell their ideas, point of view, and personal brand to the people who matter most. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want to build market eminence, amplify your influence, and attract high-value prospects, investors, partners, talent, and media opportunities with less chasing and more confidence. Let's go. Well, my friends, sometimes in the world of work, there are places that you love to work. There are places that are okay. And then there are places that you really would not want to spend another minute of your life. To fix this problem for everyone around the globe, I have the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Michael Kerr. Welcome to the show.
I thank you, David, with no pressure in that introduction.
No. Well, fixing workplaces one at a time. Someone's got to do it.
One at a time around the world. Exactly.
That's it. So do tell us the Michael Kerr journey. What were some of the interesting pit stops along the way that brought you to the work that you're doing today?
Yes. Well, the journey began. Okay, I won't go back that far. But the journey began, and the reason that I speak about what I do, and I've made this my little mission to change workplaces, is I worked in an organization that shall remain nameless because I'm not going to say very nice things about them. I love the job. I love the people. I rose up in the ranks to be a communications manager. I did a lot of speaking and training in that job. But the culture became this, how do I put it delicately, a soul-sucking, fun-sucking kind of culture that was just destroying my soul. So I ended up, here's my survivor torch, I ended up voting myself off the island because I couldn't take it anymore, David. It was like I was having way too many bad hair days. So because I did a lot of speaking and training, I knew it was something I loved doing. I knew I was good at it. So I thought, without knowing a bloody thing about the speaking business, I'm just going to jump ship from this, nice paycheck and benefits and pension and all that good stuff, and see if
this was like 1999, 2000-ish?
96.
Okay.
Yeah, about 96, 97. So I just decided, hey, I'm gonna quit doing this because it's killing me, and I'm gonna speak about the importance of work not sucking the life out of you. How crazy might it be if we actually feel more energized at the end of the day than when we went into work, even in an ideal situation.
Right.
So I, put out my little, whatchamacallit back then, I got a little rinky-dink website. I remember that I bartered with somebody, right? So this free website, I didn't know what I was doing. I just thought, I'm going to try and make this go as a professional speaker talking about inspiring workplace cultures.
Now, did you always have that topic? Because my understanding, which could be completely wrong, by the way, is that you started out as just a humorous, motivational keynote speaker, high energy opener, high energy closer, and the topic wasn't necessarily always about workplace culture. Is that incorrect?
That is correct. So that's kind of the second shift. Is for sure there was an evolution. I started out primarily in the humor in the workplace space. So I was a very funny, as you say, high energy speaker, did a lot of opening keynotes, after dinner talks, closing keynote, very, very focused on humor, but with a lot of good content behind it. I researched my buns off at the beginning, because here's something you would probably appreciate, David. I learned very quickly that there's not a lot of boardroom discussions around the world where, the CEO is going, hey, Johnson, what are our humor numbers looking like for the last quarter, right? So I had to figure out how to make this sucker relevant.
Yes.
And so in hindsight, it seems, as these things often do, right? It seems so simple and basic. But one of the kind of pivotal points in my evolution as a speaker was when I got an engagement to do a couple of workshops with this large organization in the energy field. The guy was ready to sign the contract. I was there in person, and he stopped and he looks at me and he goes, I'm a little worried about something. I'm a little worried about the optics of paying this much money for something that has the word humor in the title. Could we call it something else? And I kind of leaned back in my chair and I went, well, And here was the little light bulb moment where the first time it occurred to me even, I said, I'm not really talking about humor. Like, I'm not really talking about humor. I'm actually talking about workplace culture. I'm talking about how humor can be a tool to help you build a more collaborative, creative, innovative, resilient, positive, customer-oriented workplace culture, and how humor reflects a positive workplace culture. So let's call it, and I just pulled it out of the air right then, Inspiring Workplaces, and some subtitle that fit into their theme. But that was the point that led me down this path to thinking, okay, really, I'm an expert in workplace culture. I want to position myself as an expert, as a thought leader in workplace culture. And so that was the start of that journey.
How about that? And then, of course, he just leaned over and then continued signing the paper once his fears were put to rest.
Of course, yes.
He's like, I'm about to sign the contract, and hey, could we change this word? We can change any word anytime. We can use the word liverwurst. If you're willing to sign this number for liverwurst, that's the business I'm in.
Yeah. Put whatever, squeegee, that works for me. We'll fit it into the title.
Totally. So 25 years, it's funny, in the speaking business, I think is composed of two kinds of speakers. Number one, the kind that thinks there's two kinds of speakers, and number two is the kind that doesn't. No, I'm kidding. Two kinds of speakers. There's speakers like you and me who shift, adjust, reinvent, recreate, right? Stay relevant, stay current with what's going on. And then, and you and I both know who they are, there are speakers who are telling their story, and the story is selling, but it's the same story that they're telling on stages since 1996. So literally for 30 years, it's like, oh yeah, he's the, I got my ear bit off in a wrestling match guy, or he's the, I climbed the mountain and then fell down backwards on my head guy.
I climbed the mountain backwards guy.
Yes.
On a unicycle.
So for the people that are interested in any sort of intellectual property, speaking, coaching, consulting, training, online courses, what has been your secret for keeping it fresh? And how do you know when to make adjustments to the marketplace or the cultural conversation around the business topics that you talk on?
Oh, this is a great and huge question, David. Thank you. It's one of my guiding principles, I think, since day one. And in fact, going back to that reference I made earlier, right? I had to figure out how to make humor relevant. So I went to humor conferences. I interviewed humor academics. Even I started doing the research so I could come up with the numbers and show that this does have a serious impact on your business, on your leadership. And it's always been that case. So one of my overarching guiding principles has been be relevant. And I tell that to any speaker, anyone in the consulting business, spray paint it on the ceiling of your bedroom, so it's the first thing you see when you open your eyes in the morning. How can I be relevant?
Yeah.
Am I solving my clients' problems? Am I a problem solver? Am I helping them solve the issues that are keeping them up at night? And so several things I've done that have been really successful for me. One of the simple, and there's nothing new or revolutionary about this, but early on, I started, 2001, a weekly newsletter. It comes out every Wednesday morning.
Yeah.
And the reason I did this wasn't so much for the marketing potential. And yes, I get work from it. I get bookings from it all the time. It's one of my key drivers, in fact. But the reason I committed to doing a weekly newsletter was to force myself to stay relevant, to force myself to keep doing research, to keep finding topics and interesting stuff that I could put in this newsletter week after week after week. And I remember, you make that public commitment, right? And then it's like, oh crap, I have to do this now, right?
Right.
But it was the best thing I've ever done. And then the second best thing I think I've ever done in relation to the newsletter and all my intellectual content is, about 2010, I started a database with all of my ideas in different topics and by different audience types, different industry types. So I have this wealth of information. I have this ridiculously huge database. So if the South Dakota Plumbers phones me up for an association event, I can go to my little database and I can bring up all these interesting articles I've collected over the years, or quirky little funny stories about in the plumbing world, interesting stats. right at my fingertips. And this has helped me so much. It helps me put together sales proposals because right away I can go, okay, here's some cool, relevant stuff I can share with them before they've even hired me, just to let them know
Right.
I know some stuff about them. I've got this cool information. It gives me this wealth of data that I can weave into my presentations to make it more relevant. And then even when it comes to writing books, my very last book, this book was insanely fast to write because of this database, because I was able, as I'm writing the book, to just go through and pull out all this stuff that I'd already researched, that I'd already written in different formats. So that was a big, big piece for me. And then the other really, really big shift, and again, I probably started doing this about 2010, is I started a database actually of companies, leaders, authors, academics by geography. So whenever I had a talk somewhere in the world, anywhere in the world, I could go to this database and go, oh, cool. There are 2 really interesting, rocking workplaces within 45 minutes of where I'm going to be speaking. I'm going to reach out to them and see if I can go in and interview them. So I started doing these in-person interviews. 99% of the companies I've approached, they open you with, or they welcome you with open arms. They love it, right? You're going to brag about them. You're going to talk about them and celebrate their success. And so that helped keep me relevant. But also one of the things I did, David, was I didn't go to all the usual companies that so many speakers talk about because they're already talking about it. And a lot of people already know about them. So I purposely looked for companies that were a little more under the radar, that people had not heard about. So these stories, in some, even though I'm telling their stories, they kind of became my stories because I'm the only one talking about them, yet they're doing these incredibly cool, innovative, fun things in their organizations. So that was a huge thing to keep me relevant.
Really, really interesting. I want to dig into this whole sort of interview strategy without naming names, unless you want to name names.
Sure.
When you're interviewing these executives, they say, hey, sure, Mike, we'd love to have you. And what is it you do? And you're writing a book or you're giving a speech nearby or what's going on? Do you have any intentional strategy to turn these interviews into prospects or into opportunities to serve them?
Absolutely, totally. That's the beauty of this as well. And I've told a lot of speakers this, right? It's a really kind of easy way to slide yourself in and let them know that you're a speaker and you're not doing a cold call, which so many people are, as you know, in your world are terrified of doing.
Yeah.
It's not even doing a warm call. It's just, hey, I want to talk about you. And as you say, I'm writing a book. I'm going to put this stuff in a blog, in my newsletter.
Yeah.
I'm going to incorporate it in my talks. I'm going to spread the word about the great work you're doing. And of course, then they, oh, you're a speaker and you speak on this stuff. And it has led to engagements. Absolutely.
So could you help us craft, and I realize that rule number 1 in the age of AI is be human.
Yes.
Be human. Don't push, don't force, don't cajole, don't trick people into doing business with you. Don't do a stealth sales call once you're there on site. Given that we need to do this with integrity, do you go in with any sort of intentional structure to these interviews or a series of specific questions that you ask that would make them come up with the idea, hey, maybe Mike should do a program for us?
Yeah, and that's a really good point, David, about the AI and the whole thing. My second R that I talk about all the time is being real. And I try to keep real in everything I do, including my sales pitches, my conversation, everything. And we can talk more about that if you want after. But for sure, I craft questions based on what they're doing. Of course, they're customized to that particular industry or company. I do my research beforehand. And again, I want to be really clear. My primary goal, though, is to get great killer information that I can then share with my other audiences. So of course it's a happy benefit that they find out I'm a speaker. And through the questions, because I ask questions like, well, having spoken around the world in these different companies to these different types of industries or clients in your industry, these are some of the common questions I get. How do you deal with this? Yeah. So there's these subtle kind of references that do reinforce the fact that I know what I'm talking about, that I have this depth of expertise, that I am a speaker and trainer. I'll ask them questions about things, as you say, that sometimes they haven't occurred to. So then they will the light bulb will go on and they'll go, oh, maybe you could help us with that because we actually struggle with that one.
Hey now, what a great episode, right? Are you ready to build your own Market Eminence game plan using the power of speaking, publishing, and podcasting? Book a chat with me to build your plan and see if and how I might help you further. The link is doitmarketing.com/call. No sales team, no pressure, no goofballs, just you and me having a CEO to CEO chat about what's possible for you and your company. Hop on with me, doitmarketing.com/call. And now, let's jump right back into the interview. And who is it that you typically target? So let's say you have like an extra afternoon before your event or an extra afternoon after. Do you ask to sit down with the CEO, the COO? I mean, who's your interview subject?
The majority of time I go as high as I can in the organization. So I've interviewed a lot of CEOs, senior leaders. If they're not available, then often it will be, and this is a new position within the last, I'd say, about 10 years that more and more organizations have. They'll have somebody actually in a culture role. So they might have a chief culture officer or their culture champion. So I will try to connect with that person. Sometimes, as in a healthcare call center that I interviewed in Bedford, Texas, that I spent some time with, they actually had a chief of fun position. So that was a natural person that I wanted to interview there. But very often it is the president or the CEO. And I've got to tell you, David, like, these folks are so generous with their time. The very first time I did this in a serious way, I went over to Denmark and Sweden. And actually, just for 2 weeks, I had a 2-week gap in my calendar. That was unusual at that time of year. And so I said to my wife, why don't we go to Sweden and Denmark? There's all these great, really cool companies over there that are doing cool stuff. Turn this into a research trip, get a tax write-off, and visit Denmark and Sweden. It sounds pretty good to me. So the first company I went into was a company in Copenhagen. And of course, they're CEOs. You want to be respectful of their time, right? Like, oh, if you could just spare 15 minutes, that would be awesome. Well, this first CEO had a welcome sign for my wife and I. He greeted us with his own customized PowerPoint presentation and food and drinks. He took us out for lunch. He spent 4 hours with us. I filled up a notepad full of notes that sits behind me on my shelf here to this day that I still reference to because he was a wealth of information. And he was like a little kid. He was so excited to share his story and how their company had totally ramped up their culture and ramped up their business results. And nobody had ever interviewed him before like this. So he was excited to get his messages out there to the world. He was so flattered, right? And so many of these folks have just been incredibly generous with their time.
So I want to go back to your book and then even your previous book. So the book that's out now, your book from the most recent book, Small Moments, Big Outcomes. Big Outcomes.
Big Outcomes. How leaders create cultures that fuel extraordinary results.
Yes. So I want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about your book that came out, I want to call it mid-COVID, right? So 2021, you come out with the Jerk-Free Workplace.
Oh, yes. Yes.
I'm looking at this, Mike, and I'm like, he could have, if this is 2021, you could have written the Germ-Free Workplace in 2021, but you went with Jerk-Free Workplace. So this has evolved from Inspire and Feel Their Fire, The Humor Advantage, The Jerk-Free Workplace, and now Small Moments, Big Outcomes.
Right.
What was it like to put that book out in 2021, where we're just kind of in the middle of this whole COVID craziness? There wasn't really a vaccine yet. Offices were empty. How did you handle that? How did you navigate that very unusual business landscape where that book came out in?
It was unusual timing for the book, for sure. I love your idea, germ-free workplace. Maybe that would have sold more.
Could be.
Well, everything was virtual, of course. I did a virtual book launch.
Yeah,
which is still a lot of people are still doing that today. A lot of authors and speakers do that still. And I did a lot of just kind of free at the time, free short webinar-y kind of presentations virtually to talk about the book, to help promote it. And then just reaching out to a lot of my former clients and sending them copies of the book to see if this would be helpful. Now the idea of the jerk-free workplace, and in fact, those previous titles that you mentioned, the Humor Advantage, the Jerk-Free Workplace, Hire, Inspire, Fuel Their Fire, those all feed up to this book. Yes. So they are sort of subcomponents. The journey kind of builds like this, and Small Moments, Big Outcome is kind of the opus, the Bible of workplace culture, if you will, with so much of my thoughts, my research over the last 20 years, all in this puppy. But the Jerk-Free Workplace was very specifically, it came out of a need from talking to a lot of clients. So that book is on leadership as well. It's really about frontline leadership. So the subtitle is how you can, oh God, I've forgotten the subtitle. That's not a good thing with your own book, isn't it? It's, that's not it. I have too many books. Where's my jerk-free? Oh, there it is. It's how you can take the lead to create a happier, more inspiring workplace. So it's really about frontline leadership. So I market this book, I pitch this book to senior executives with the urgent plea, you need to put this in the hands of all of your employees. This is a book that all 200 of your employees should read, because it's about them not only not being a jerk, but moving along that spectrum from being less of a jerk to stepping up and being a frontline leader. And hey, does it not make sense that if you have everybody in your organization thinking and acting like a leader, you are going to be way more successful than you've ever been. So that was the idea behind that book. It's a fairly quick read. It's a fun read, but it's really targeted at every employee in an organization to think about their mindset, their attitude, how they're communicating. Are they being service focused? Are they bringing their sense of humor along for the ride?
Well, I think that's the other theme that runs through so much of your work is not the humor piece, because the humor, I think, is a lagging indicator, but it's be human, right? Be a human being, because human beings, they laugh, they cry, they're empathetic, they're good listeners. Hopefully they're good listeners. It's not about, hey, let's be funny like Mike or let's be funny like David. It's be more human, right? Be more open, be more vulnerable, be more communicative. One thing 100%. That I think people leaders mostly don't really consider is when your folks go home and their spouse or their kids say, hey, dad, hey, mom, how was your day at work? The answer to how was your day at work at the dinner table is a reflection of how you performed as a leader that day.
Totally.
Talk more about that and how that impacts people both personally and professionally.
Yeah, and I point this out in every single talk that I do, every single talk, every single book. That is my starting point is, hey, this thing called work, it consumes a hell of a lot of our time. The single biggest use of your waking hours in this short journey called life, the single biggest use of your time, energy, passion, talent. It affects your marriages. It affects your kids. It affects your happiness level, your physical and mental health. It affects your personal growth, your identity, who you socialize with, where you live, for goodness sakes. It has a huge impact on our lives. So let's remind ourselves that maybe we owe it to the people that we are working with. We owe it to the family members of the people that we work with. We owe it to our customers and clients to create as positive, as collaborative, as inspiring, and as you say, as human and humane a workplace as possible. And that is one of the things I stress all the time when I talk about humor. And you nailed it. I remind audiences, look, I'm not talking about telling jokes or being the office clown or doing stand-up comedy. It's not even always about being funny. It is just being more authentic, being more real, creating that psychologically safe work environment where people are allowed to laugh and bring themselves to work. I'm talking about laughing at the things you have no control over in the workplace, which is quite a bit on most days, like 187%. And especially for the senior leaders, I remind them that it's about learning to laugh at yourself more. That there's this truism that we've all seen, that the more serious a person takes themselves, the less seriously everyone around them takes them, right?
Yes.
Which is ironic because people take themselves so bloody seriously in the hopes that everyone will take me seriously. And it backfires. Nobody is taking you seriously because you're taking yourself so seriously.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. Well, talk a little bit, because each of these books, I'm guessing, created some sort of inflection point in your business, in your career, in the kinds of audiences that you were being attracted to, the kinds of work, the kinds of clients that were knocking on your door. When you have these different books over a long career, you sort of did stay in your bucket, but you did not necessarily, quote unquote, stay in your lane, right? It's like, oh no, I've written 17 books on customer service, and they all say the same thing, and they're just updated slightly with, like, new copyright dates.
Yeah.
But you have really, you've taken this almost like work-life experience is this jewel. And each of the books over time, you're exposing to the light a different facet of that jewel, and it's getting richer and deeper as you go. So I think you're a great example, Mike, of diversify while still specializing.
Yeah. Oh, I love, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how do you not get pulled off into shiny, because you're doing all this research and you're doing all these interviews like, oh, I should do something on mobile work. I should do something on remote work. I should do something on, rewards and recognition programs. And you can be pulled in 100 different directions. How do you stay the course and realize that this is the mountain that Mike Kerr wants to own?
Yeah, so I love that question because I think about it a lot. Because workplace culture has become, of course, what I think of as my primary expertise, as my thought leadership is workplace culture. But that is a very broad topic, and that's why I was partly drawn to it. I love the interconnectedness of things. There's all sorts of chicken and egg relationships you can talk about with workplace culture, and so there are these kind of offshoots.
Yeah,
but I do try to be very careful that I'm not straying too off of the highway. So I might take an exit ramp for a brief little detour, but then I get back on the highway, and so that connection always has to be back to workplace culture.
Yeah.
So there are topics, or even if people bring them up when I'm interviewing them, where I know, well, okay, I don't want to go too far down this road because, for example, I'm not a time management guy. I don't talk about that at all.
Right.
I don't really talk about work-life balance, even though obviously that's part of a positive workplace culture. So I try to keep within my area, that workplace culture, and so I try to still always find that tentacle that connects it back to workplace culture. So, for example, if we talk about, say, customer service, I can talk a lot about customer service, but I always put it in the framework of creating a culture that supports excellent customer service. What does that look like? What does that look like to be a culture leader as it pertains to your customer service? So it's not just customer service per se.
Yeah.
It's thinking about it from a cultural perspective. So I always make that connection back, and I always make sure and that's one way to stay relevant too for us, right? I think there is a huge, and we've all seen it, I know you've seen it, where speakers jump on the latest I'm going to be an expert on the generations because that's the hottest topic right now.
Yes.
I'm going to be a DEI expert because maybe that's not the hottest topic right now, but the hottest topic, the topic du jour, and we've seen speakers make that leap. So I'm always very cognizant not to do that. However, I do think that we can become more relevant by learning enough about kind of these tangential topics that, if you think of it as can I do a Venn diagram here?
Yes.
Venn diagram. You've got your area of expertise, and then this other area that kind of butts up alongside your area of expertise. If you can learn enough about that.
Yeah.
So you're not telling folks you're an expert in this. There's no way you're an expert in this. If you want a standalone person on this topic, I am not your guy. However, I know enough about it that I can make the connection back to my core area of expertise. I can tie it back to culture. I can talk about the chicken and egg relationship between this topic as it pertains to culture.
Holy smokes, so much value in this episode. Listen, if you are loving what you're hearing, feel free to download, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to The Selling Show. Now, back to the interview. Well, let me ask you, this is something that a lot of companies and a lot of leaders are wrestling with right here, right now, which is this mandate to go back to the office. Back to the office.
Yes.
And a lot of these mid-level managers and even some of the senior managers, they don't have control over that because that decision is being made at the very, very top.
Yeah.
So CEO level, board level, whatever. What are your thoughts on these back to work mandates, the end of the work from home era? And what can a mid-level or even senior level manager who it's not their decision, but they need to rally the troops and they need to foster a great workplace culture, even if and when some people like, man, I wish I was still at home in my sweat socks. I got so much more done. I was so much more productive. I didn't have to commute. I actually worked harder. I actually got better results, but they're making me come back to the office. So you're in a tough position there, but what would your advice be for those leaders?
My advice is that, again, you have to circle back like never before and be even more intentional about your culture. Because culture is everything when it comes to that. And it doesn't matter in theory where people are working. I deliver this message all the time during the lockdown, of course, that culture is culture is culture. Yes, there are certain things that are more challenging when you aren't seeing everybody at the office every day.
Yeah.
But it is culture that is going to get you through this. It is your values, your cultural norms that is going to keep you connected and create that sense of community, even if people are spread out all across the country in their home offices. You've just got to be extra uber intentional about those touch points, about how you run your virtual meetings, about how you connect with people and recognize people when they're remote, out of sight, out of mind. So you've got to be that much more intentional. I think in an ideal world, I say this all the time, in an ideal world, those people who are in jobs, because of the nature of the job and the person's personality, if they could work from home and make that work, and the people who want to work in an office, because a lot of people don't like working at home at the same time, right? So in an ideal world, those people who need to be at the office, and their job suited better for that would be there, right? And everything would work out just beautifully. So I think in those situations that you talked about, when people do begrudgingly have to come back, I think you've got to relentlessly sell the benefits. And it's not enough to just say, well, you have to come back because you have to come back, right? You have to come back because we don't trust you. That's probably not a good message to say. So make sure you are very clear on the goals of what you're trying to achieve by having everyone in the office, why this matters. And then, as I say, double down on your culture and give them a reason to want to come back. And that could look like a lot of different things. Maybe it's more opportunities to connect with people in more collaborative, creative ways than you ever have before. Making sure you're doing regular in-person check-in meetings with your team, doing more fun events, making it fun and rewarding to come into the office. And we have a mountain of research, I want to suggest too, a mountain of research as to why people don't like working in the office over their home. So that's gold in terms of data. So look at that stuff and what can you do to minimize that? So if everybody's saying, oh, I don't want to go back to the office because the politics are just brutal there. Well, okay, you've got a politics problem there. Maybe talk about that. Talk about what you can do to minimize the politics. If it's the commute that is frustrating your employees, well, what can you do to ease their commute? What creative strategies could you come up with so they're not dreading that Monday morning commute?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the risk of a shameless plug for you and your brilliance and your services, would you say, and maybe you've already gotten calls like this, hey, Mike, we're just about to institute, everyone's coming back to the office. We really need some help in softening the blow and giving our leaders and our frontline folks some strategies to readjust to this new, hey, we're back in the office rock, party like it's 2019, not 1999, but party like it's 2019 and help us reintegrate our workforce to an on-site culture where it used to be a remote culture. Good time to pick up the bat phone and call you?
Oh, totally good time. Totally good time.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're too nice. You're too Canadian. Like you wouldn't say it, so I had to say it. I had to say it.
No, this is the nice thing about my topic, what I speak on too, because I get calls because I'm known for my humor, because I talk about positive workplace cultures and known for my fun energy, my humor. I get calls on both sides of the spectrum, right?
Yes.
So I get calls from clients when they're celebrating, where they're saying, "Hey, we just had our best year ever. We want to celebrate. Can you come in and just help us celebrate and crank up the troops even more?" But then I get it at the other end of the spectrum. We just had our worst year ever. Everyone's demoralized. We're dealing with a lot of change. Can you come in and help energize the workplace?
Yes. Let me ask you this just about your sales process.
Yeah.
Because you do all this research and you really have your ear to the ground in the business landscape. Let's say that a big Canadian company, big US company just announced return to work, return to the office. Are you scanning the headlines for trigger events? Are you looking for opportunities of who's being quoted in the business media or the general news media about company merger, acquisition, upsizing, downsizing, good news, bad news, otherwise news, where they're about to have a culture problem? They're aware, or there's some emerging that's happening. Do you use that to reach out to these folks and invite them to a conversation about how you might be helpful to them?
I do a bit. I do a bit of that. I don't do a lot of cold outreach. I do but to answer your question, yes. If there's like just an incredible opportunity where I think, oh my God, this is such a match. For my style, for what I talk about, this company is just, then for sure I reach out. But so much of my business is referral business, repeat business, word of mouth business, that I'm in the very fortunate position of not having to do a lot of outreach, not having to do a lot of cold calling. But certainly if there are those opportunities, absolutely.
Well, so there's two things so cold outreach, I think, is silly. Trigger events, and especially if you're calling not to sell them something. Let's say that you read about a trigger event in the business journal or the business section of the metropolitan paper. You see the executives that are quoted in this challenging situation, or it could be even good news, and then they suddenly get an invitation to an interview. So it's, hey, I saw this in the paper. You're going through some exciting stuff. I'm researching X, Y, and Z. Can we? And then you do the interview invitation.
Absolutely. And absolutely. So, and that will go into that database I was telling you about, by geography. And I'll totally. And I'll reach out to them and say, hey, I'm going to be in your neck of the woods. I'm speaking in Toronto next month. Can you find some time to meet with me? And I want to ask you these questions, and I want to celebrate your success or ask you about these challenges with the merger that's going on. So absolutely. And I might reach out even right away. If it's a great fit, like a really good fit, then I might even do a trip just to interview them.
Ooh, exciting. So you've had some good success doing these in person. Like, you'll make an effort to coordinate with your speaking calendar and show up in person at the appointment, more so than do it on Zoom.
Way more so than on Zoom. Even with the pandemic and all of us getting used to this more, it's pretty rare I do it through Zoom, because I want to interact with different people. I want to see the office environment. I want to see their building. I want to just have that in-person contact. Sometimes I'll do a video interview with them. So I'll bring my video camera along and we'll do a video interview in addition to me just sitting down and interviewing them. So I like the in-person connection.
And that's where you get the red carpet and the 4-hour meetings and the snacks.
Yes.
The snacks, the lunches, the dinners.
Lunch in the executive CEO dining room and stuff. They're incredibly welcoming. I just love it.
Well, We definitely want to tell people how to get a hold of more Mike Kerr brilliance. Obviously, the book is Small Moments, Big Outcomes, How Leaders Create Cultures That Fuel Extraordinary Results. But where else can we send people? What other resources would you like to share that we can put in the show notes?
Well, my website is www.mikekerr.com, and I would invite, if anybody's interested in signing up for my weekly newsletter where I talk about all this stuff. It's very fun, lots of humor in it, lots of great content in it. It's a quick read, less than 5 minutes, goes out every Wednesday morning, inspiring workplaces. So at the bottom of my homepage, you can sign up there. And of course, my books are all available on Amazon.
Wherever fine books are sold.
Wherever fine books are sold.
All right. Well, Mike Kerr, you are a rock star. I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your brilliance.
Thank you. Thank you, David. It's been an honor to be here. It's been a blast.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.